Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. The topic for today's webinar is email deliverability. This is one of the most important factors for email success, and we want to spend time today discussing how to maximize your ability to reach the inboxes of your customers and prospects. So I'm Melinda Prescher, and I'm your host for today's event. I have a couple of Insightly team members who are reviewing questions that come in through the chat pod. So we'll answer as many as we can. Travis Northup and Courtney Dupree will answer questions during the presentation. And we'll also save time at the end for more Q&A with Al, our guest. If your question doesn't get answered during this session, I'll absolutely be sure to have someone from Insightly reach out to you later this week. So I'd like to introduce you now to Al Iverson. I'm so thrilled to have him here. He's Director of Deliverability Products and Services at Kickbox, which is the most trusted, secure, and accurate email verification and delivery solution on the market today. Al brings over 20 years of technical expertise to today's conversation. Prior to Kickbox, Al has held director roles at Salesforce, ExactTarget, Digital River, and he's also got a tremendous level of expertise in product management and product development. So to level set, there are three things that we want to cover during today's webinar. We want to give you a solid foundation in understanding what drives deliverability. We want to help you understand what to do, and just as importantly, what not to do. And finally, we'll make sure that we're helping you maximize your success in reaching the inbox. So all that said, Al, I'm so thrilled to bring you to our audience today. Where would you like to begin?
Thanks, Melinda. Why don't we start with the evolution of spam filters to understand why we're talking about what we're going to talk about. How did we get to this point? What are the things that led us up to current best practices for email filtering, for spam filtering? And over the past 25 years, ISP spam filters started out with a very basic trying to measure and block spam, blocking lists of bad guys based on their sending IP addresses, doing simple keyword blocks to try to block words showing up in spam. And that's evolved over time through a whole series of stuff. And not to read the little tiny type on all of the words on the slide, but you can see that as filters have gotten more complex, it gets easier to get tripped up in those filters. And it's not so much that the filters are aimed at blocking mail from legitimate marketers. The real goal here for a lot of ISPs is to prevent, things like business email compromise, phishing and spoofing, and really bad and just evil stuff. So all of this is all about how to be the good guy, to look like you show to the ISPs that you're doing the right thing, and to keep yourself from running afoul of these issues. It's very much an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure kind of thing. So before we talk about deliverability and reputation, I did want to touch on compliance very quickly. It's not so much CAN spam compliance, the US federal anti-spam law. It's important that you comply with it, but it's not so much a governing factor as far as whether or not mail is going to get to the inbox or not. It's a little bit of an oddball of a law in that it doesn't expressly prohibit spam itself, but it has some guidelines and essential requirements that are sort of a de facto ban on spam. Because what it allows spam with that little asterisk, but then it also allows ISPs to block spam, and they're indemnified from legal action against them by angry senders who might be mad that their mail was unfairly targeted as spam. So while it does matter that you comply with CAN spam, it's really just sort of the entry level, table stakes. Everybody doing email marketing should be complying with it. There's a very easy opt-in standard in there called the affirmative consent standard to look to. And keep in mind that ISPs block millions of CAN spam compliant messages daily. So it's CAN spam is a start, not a finish.
Got it. This is really interesting. Does it differ much? Do you see much difference between B2B sends and B2C sends?
B2B is a little bit more of a Wild West in that compliance actions are a little rarer there. And I think that's because of the nature of the volumes. If you look at, a B2C business or direct consumer business, they're selling in higher volumes to more people. So they're sending to more people, bigger lists, more data, versus the B2B environment, especially in the enterprise realm. The volumes are very little. The amount of mail is very small. It may be bulk mail. It's supposed to comply with canned spam and all the other rules, but it might be one of those things where it slips through the cracks a little more. I know personally I get more B2B spam than I do B2C spam. It's not because ISPs want to let it through, it's that it can be harder for them to catch.
Got it. Okay.
So deliverability is really what I wanted to talk about today. And deliverability is sort of the art and science of did your mail get to the inbox, and how to ensure that your mail got to the inbox, how to maximize that, what to do and what to not do to be able to ensure that you're actually able to reach and connect with the recipients on your subscriber list.
Okay.
And the basis for that deliverability is all about reputation. We're going to talk in a little more detail here as we go along about reputation, but at its core, your reputation is the governing factor is whether or not you're going to get mail delivered to the inbox successfully at any of the top ISPs, whether it be, Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo or the B2B realm with your CloudMark, Proofpoint, and Barracuda and those sort of things. These are all based on statistics that ISPs generate, summarize based on what they see of your mail activity. So it's metrics, that anything they can measure about your mail, whether it's wanted, unwanted, how much it's interacted with, how much it's not interacted with, et cetera. Those all roll up to give an ISP a reputational view to help them determine whether or not they think a sender is a good guy or a bad guy.
Got it.
That reputation is very much feedback driven. Any mechanism that an ISP can use to understand whether or not that mail is wanted or unwanted is very valuable feedback to them. Engagement being a very modern, one of the newest and modern ways to identify that. What I mean by that is if subscribers are very unlikely to engage with your mail, if they're engaging with your mail, opening it, clicking it, viewing it, et cetera, at rates much lower than others, if they're engaging with other people's mail and not yours, ISPs notice that. That is a feedback-driven mechanism to that ISP to tell the ISP that, hey, this mail is perhaps not wanted. There's a lot of other reputational feedback indicators too, from sending spam complaints, that report spam button in ISPs, in Gmail, in your webmail, that sort of thing. All of that data, anything that an ISP can use to get feedback about you, it's very important to them. Microsoft even has a thing called SRD, sender reported data, or something like that, where it's sort of like they impanel a subset of your subscribers and invite them to vote on whether or not you deserve to be in the inbox or not. So that's an example of they're very directly requesting feedback to try to determine who are the good senders and who are the bad senders.
Wow. I mean, my next question was really going to be, how have you seen companies monitor that feedback loop? And you've given a good example. Anything else you'd like to mention there?
Yeah, and we'll touch more on this in detail in some of the future slides. It'll start with, what can you look at from your sending platform metrics, looking at the data from your sends to be able to tell what are your best performing sends and worst performing sends, highest opens and clicks and lowest bounce rates and those sort of things, just as your starting point to get your basic fundamental understanding of a good send versus a bad send. And then there's the next level stuff that you can do to help measure and monitor with the Kickbox tools that I'll touch on a little bit as well.
Okay. I'll let you move on then.
Thank you. So, the reputation characteristics are all about these different things things you can do good and things that you can do that will cause bad things to sort of get marked down in the reputation book of you, as far as an ISP is concerned. From the good side, it's all about sending engaging mail that people want, that they interact with. It's very likely that an ISP is going to recognize that. It's going to put that mail in the inbox. That is the core. There's spam filtering is a big black box with a whole bunch of moving parts in that engine. But if there's one bullet point there, that's what improves the ability to get the inbox, what drives that, and that's high engagement. So high opens, high clicks, high interactions, desirable interactions with those mail. That's what labels you as a good person. Just a point of clarification, if you're looking at this and wondering what's a TINS click, that is the "this is not spam" button. So if you see a mail in the spam folder and you go, "Oh, I really did want this," you click the "not spam" to tell the ISP that they made a mistake. That's what TINS means, and those are valuable data points to clients. ISPs will do sort of taste testing or sampling where they'll put little bits of your mail in the spam folder just to see how people respond to it. They're looking to see, do people look at that and go, "Oh, that shouldn't be in spam," click the TINS button. So those are all good things that can help boost your sending reputation. And then there's all the bad things, right? If people are sending in spam complaints about your mail, if they're reporting you to third parties like Spam Cop, that sort of thing, sending mail to bad addresses, which are spam traps, are a good example of bad addresses, either typos or addresses that were recycled or no longer exist. They're de facto proof to some ISPs and anti-spam groups that a sender or marketer has a list hygiene problem. And then, like I touched on too, besides the good set of interactions, there's also sort of interactions can reflect poorly upon you. Low opens, low click, high bounce rate. That's another thing that ISPs can tell. If 50% of what you send bounces back, ISPs notice that. They have logging of all of that, and they will stack rank senders based on that too. Perhaps not, it doesn't rank as highly as interactions, engagement, for example, but it's another data point that can tell an ISP that you're perhaps not the best sender. So those levers, how do you move things in the right direction? And it starts with what is perhaps some fairly simple concepts, but it's very important stuff. Sending good data, so sending wanted mail, sending expected mail, mailing to people who expected it, who signed up for it. It means no third-party data, clear and direct opt-in, not buried in terms and conditions and 3 pages of legalese, no purchase lists, right? If somebody didn't sign up to get an email from you, they're not going to expect that email from you. Regardless of your brand, they're going to be more likely to report it as spam. They're going to be less likely to engage with it, and it's going to do damage to your reputation, which is going to make it harder for you to deliver successfully to the inbox.
Yeah. You know, as soon as you shared this list, the wheels started turning for me about what we might recommend to people to help them understand what they can do to help basically build their own lists organically and improve their reputation. So I wanted to go through that here. There are a number of areas that we as marketers can focus on to help build our audiences. So first and foremost, really, it all starts with great content. It really should be timely, relevant, insightful, and engagingly well written. People have to want it. They have to want to read it. You also need fresh content. There are a lot of great storylines, for example, that you can even get out of a single piece to make things go a little bit further. For example, a customer interview could become a blog post, a social post, a customer story video that's posted to your website, and a webinar. So really maximize your ability to turn one piece of content into several and populate that content across multiple channels. That's really my next point. Distribute it where your audience is hanging out, where your audience can easily access it. So examples of those places might be the social channels, your website, webinars, review sites, and sales channels. You know your industry best, so go where people are looking for your expertise and insights and the unique value proposition that you bring. Iteration is also really important. Every marketer should be testing all the time to find out what's resonating and then building future plans based on what you learn. Make it really easy for people to find you by focusing on SEO and very intentionally trying to rank for keywords that your prospects will be looking for on the web. And again, this is a really iterative process. Make it simple for people to opt in by keeping your forms on your landing pages really short and sweet. Just the minimum information that you need to be able to communicate back. And finally, have a deep understanding of what your prospects are looking for. Use your sales team. Review the competition. Know your sources of information and the channels that are important in your industry. Know who your thought leaders are. Listen to gong calls for more information. Make sure that you know what your prospects and customers need, and then serve that content to them in a way that's really easy for them to access. So Al, let's bring all of this back to deliverability. How can people get a sense of what's working?
So measuring deliverability is very important. And it starts with the sending platform. You've got a mock-up here of the Insightly data. What you can get from your sending platform is how many people are opening, how many people are clicking, how many people are unsubscribing, what percentage of your list is bouncing, and for any given send or set of sends or a period of time. Look at that over time, look for trends, try to, again, identify what are the peaks and valleys that can help you identify good data versus bad data. That when you have a deliverability problem, to be able to tell, when did things change? What happened on the 13th that might have caused a deliverability issue on the 13th? That's very valuable to be able to understand and sort of back into where a deliverability problem might have come from. But there are other tools as well that you get more information on top of that. And things you can do to sort of measure and improve deliverability is use an email verification tool like Kickbox verification, so that you can ensure that your data upfront is validated upon entry. Even some people integrate that into a sign-up process so they give live feedback to try to keep bad addresses out of the way. And then use a testing tool like Kickbox as a deliverability suite, an inbox placement tool, for example, that'll help you better measure, are you specifically getting to the inbox or not at these different internet service providers? And that's all key. These are all technical tools that are meant to address sort of a marketing problem. The key here is send wanted mail. If you're sending wanted mail, that is the best way to minimize your chances of deliverability issues. I touched on email verification, right? And what that does is it helps to try to ensure that you maximize deliverability by minimizing the amount of bad data ending up in your email stream. It's that simple. It doesn't magically fix all problems. It's not the only solution to a deliverability issue, but it is good to help boost deliverability success through better data.
Okay.
And I mentioned Kickbox has a pretty cool, if I do say so myself, set of deliverability tools to help measure inbox placement and monitor for block lists and other stuff. But hey, you don't necessarily have to buy something from us, though I wish you would, because I like money. But we do have this cool free testing tool called KBX Score. Your sending platform, in this case, Insightly, does a lot to put you on the best foot forward from a technical perspective to make sure that everything's configured properly to help maximize deliverability success. But there are additional checks beyond that. A very simple content check against the spam assassin filter, and a bunch of other things to look at: header settings, and is your domain name configured correctly? Could anything have gone wrong with DNS or other settings? This little KBX Score tool is sort of a simple little mail tester that'll help you ensure that everything is configured properly to know that at least you do not have a technical issue potentially contributing to a deliverability problem. If you want to do one of those, I forgot to clarify, when you go to KBX Score, it'll give you a unique address that you send to, and then it'll generate a report like it shows on the screen.
Great, really comprehensive.
Now, if you need more help, I certainly would love to talk to you more. I didn't want to hijack the webinar and make it super salesy. But we do have a bunch of cool deliverability related tools, help you measure inbox placement. The reason I keep talking about inbox placement is because an ISP doesn't give information back to the sender to say, did we put your mail in the inbox or the spam folder? So the only way you get that data is by visually looking at it either yourself by signing up for your own list with your Gmail account to see, did it go to the inbox for me at Gmail? But if you want to broaden that out to multiple addresses, multiple ISPs, trends over time, auto collection of data, that's where a tool like our inbox placement tool comes into place to help you automate and more broadly do testing to determine inbox placement. We've got that and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you want to a free trial or talk to me more or have questions about that, I can be reached at alekkickbox.com. And of course, don't forget Insightly too. They have a lot of expertise and are knowledgeable, and they know what they're doing and can help you with email deliverability issues as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I think, like we mentioned, we wanted to save quite a bit of time for questions. And we've gotten some questions that have come in. And so I'm just going to start going down the list and let's take a look at this. So we had one question: how much does your email address matter when it comes to getting through?
And not a ton, but with a few exceptions. I think people will say, well, what about unique TLDs like dot photography, dot life, or dot guru or whatever instead of a .com address? And there can be some examples where if a different TLD that's a top level domain like .com, for example, is the most common TLD. If a TLD is particularly infested with spammers, that can be kind of a bad choice. So like to pick one where there's problems. That's kind of rare though. I think if you're worried about that, you can search. There's Spamhaus has a list of spammiest TLDs. That's pretty easy to find. And that can kind of tell you, they'll give you their top 10 of ones to avoid. But with that exception of those that the few sort of worst sort of wrecked TLD neighborhoods, your email address or domain name itself shouldn't matter that much. What it is doesn't matter. How you use it is what's matter. Did you build up the reputation properly through, an IP warming or domain warming process? You appropriately introduce that brand, that domain name. Your subscribers know it. They're expecting mail from that domain. That's more important, more so than what the domain name actually is.
Got it. What about this one? Do you have any specific recommendations that are unique for new businesses? So someone is saying that they are working really hard to build their mailing list, but their list isn't that big yet. They're starting from scratch. Anything specific to small business, just getting started?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm the guy full of no's, just because I get called in to try to fix things that have gone wrong, and so my no here is try to avoid getting caught in the cold leads trap, where if you're using your domain name primarily to send cold lead email, even at very low volume, that causes a tummy upset, a reputation upset. That's going to make it a lot harder for that mail from your domain to get to the inbox. Gmail in particular will log that domain as having a bad reputation, and because of the small volumes involved, it can be very hard to sort of climb out of that hole. Then beyond that, it starts to get a little bit beyond my expertise. But what the question you really want to answer there is, how do I list build and list grow appropriately? And I would defer to Melinda and Insightly on what better best practices like she talked about for list growth, and with me being more like I said, the king of things to avoid.
Yeah. No, I mean, really referring back to what we talked about earlier in terms of, content is really king, and the internet and social channels have really, really accentuated that. So I think that is just it's incredibly important to be there, be where people are at, and also have a really solid flow of content to your audience. Stay in touch, be available. That's huge. We have a couple of questions around things like, what is an acceptable range for bounce rate? And also, what is an acceptable open rate?
So bounce rates vary so much as to it be almost impossible to give sort of a back of the napkin average. You really want your delivery rate, in other words, your send rate minus the bounces, to be in the high 90s percentage wise. Mm-hmm. I would say I have a lot of clients where their bounce rate could be anywhere from 0.5% up to 2-3%. If it starts to get far above that, then you potentially have an acquisition issue. One of some inbound funnel has a higher than expected number of sort of bad leads or bad addresses, and especially, but there can be so many exceptions to that based on industry and how often you mail, and are you switching providers. So maybe you have a slightly higher bounce rate when you transfer providers, because they're able to try to mail addresses that a prior provider might have suppressed, for example. But like I said, if there's a starting point, half percent to 3-4% is, probably wouldn't be too worrying to me. And then, so what about, you said about opens too? Opens is another one where there's a wide variety, and the short answer is, if you're getting 20-ish%, you're getting a good open rate. But certainly, especially in the direct consumer marketing realm, there's an opportunity to get way more than that. You could be getting double that in a lot of cases. Apple changes that though a little bit, because more than half of opens nowadays for a lot of B2C lists in the US, the opens are tracking through that new Apple privacy protection. So it makes it harder to sort of figure out which part of that is real opens, and so your opens counts or percentages are inflated. But so you can still see that there's good value. People are responding to it inside of that sort of little bit of a mess of data, and you can still use it for trending over time. So it might be, you can't look at one single send and know that your open rate is exactly accurate now, but you can compare it send to send to look at trends to see if you're going up or down, right direction or wrong direction.
Okay. An anonymous question came in. What are the first steps that you would take once a reputation has kind of taken a hit and you have to rebuild?
So the key to any deliverability issue is to try to figure out what went wrong and undo it. So that means that the fix is going to be based on what the underlying problem is. An example for one of the clients that I just finished working with was that they were in stealth mode. They were capturing email addresses and not doing anything with them yet, but now it was time to launch their product. So they just fired it all up and started mailing many thousands of people all at once. And that sort of jump in volume on their new domain name is what caused the ISPs to sort of freak out and put the mail in the spam folder. So in that case, the fix for them was to have them start over. And starting over meant reducing volume, going through a calendar, an IP or domain warming calendar, where we limit their daily volume and build up volume over time to sort of ease the ISPs into the understanding that this client is a good sender, this brand is a good sender and doesn't deserve to be in the spam folder. And that was successful in that case. So it's a lot of stuff like that. If you accidentally blasted too much volume or having issues, it's really just bring it back and start up slow. If you had, high spam complaints or some sort of capture issue caused a blocklisting, it might be identifying and reconfirming or deleting a bad data source or something else. Again, it can vary quite a bit depending on what the underlying source of the issue might have been.
Al, are you familiar with double opt-in and the benefits? That is a question that's come in, whether you can elaborate on double opt-in.
Absolutely. So what double opt-in does is it's a methodology where when somebody signs up, an email is sent to them and they have to click on the link in the email to verify their address before they're added to a list. It is a good thing, but it also can be challenging. A lot of marketers don't like it because there's a drop-off rate associated with adding additional steps to the opt-in process. It helps keep a list clean up front. And if you really wanted to go crazy is a silly word for that, but if you really wanted to go the whole 9 yards and set up a double opt-in, make sure you're verifying every single address that comes through with a double opt-in. It does help with deliverability issues, but at the end of the day, you end up with a smaller list. So it's always a sort of a trade-off. You'll see like some newsletter tools, they will only engage us sometimes if they think an opt-in is suspicious or sign up is suspicious. And then list verification tools help with that to some degree too, where it helps tell you that an address is more likely to be valid. Sometimes in any of those processes, there's something you have to protect against, which is sort of bot attacks, where there are people out there who will just attack sign-up forms and put 50,000 addresses in a sign-up form. With double opt-in, the damage is mitigated a little bit in that you only annoy the 50,000 people with a sign-up message instead of ongoing list email. But the fact of the matter is, you still annoy 50,000 people. So that's where something like instead of or on top of an email verification, you should also do like a capture or prove that you're human. Those can be defeated by really bad guys, but most of the time they do work to slow down the bad guys. And so what you want to do is prevent bad guys from just being able to load up, really large amounts of bad data up front. And so any combination of those tools will help with that. But if you're verifying addresses one way or another and putting a capture in front of it, you're going to be good to go whether or not you're doing a double opt-in.
Got it. Al, what's the good starting volume for IP or domain warming? Does that matter?
Yeah, and it can really depend on what the client's industry is a little bit, and maybe their sending platform. I think if there's, in sending industry too, because if you're sending B2C consumer mail versus political mail, like in B2C consumer mail, you can start with probably more volume up front, and versus political mail, where it's be a little trickier to make sure that you're appropriately engaging with the right audience at levels that's not going to upset an ISP spam filter. It's sort of a nature of the beast, where if political is sort of a heavily abused spammy-ish industry, so ISP is a little more sensitive to mail like that. So it can be just a few hundred messages per day and building up, by 10 or 15% day over day over day. Versus B2C, consumer mailing, you could probably be starting with 5,000 messages a day, and building it up so that you're sort of doubling the daily volume week over week. But IP warming is also one of those things where if you ask 10 people about it, 10 different people about it, you'll get 10 different opinions. And they're not all wrong. There's a lot of smart people out there with different takes on it. And that's because ISP filters are black boxes. It's a little bit tough to reverse engineer exactly what the best volume is. And so I could have tested it and found a good volume that works for my clients, while somebody else could have tested it, come up with a different number that still works fine for their clients too. So if somebody comes up with guidance that's significantly different than mine, there's a good chance they're not an idiot. So I wouldn't dismiss them out of hand.
Got it. Well, we've come to the end of our time today, and I know there are still questions out there. I will definitely make sure that those questions get answered, that you get a response to those. Al, I just really want to thank you so much for joining us today. This was really insightful, lots of great information here. And I also want to thank the audience for taking the time to join us today. And on the other side, if you've got a CSM with Insightly, you've got more questions, definitely reach out to your CSM, or feel free to email us at sales@insightly.com. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great day.